MTC EBS 202, Test 3. Number 1. Dear Mr. Marks. Marks. It has come to my attention that you were responsible for this past weekend's Halloween scare email that was circulated through our corporation's intranet mail system. Halloween scare. The rather large graphic file you created and mass-mailed to all departments and all personnel was not only thematically and visually inappropriate, but it overloaded our servers and crashed key hubs in Charlotte, Biloxi, and Mobile, temporarily crippling business in the southern region. Charlotte, Biloxi, Mobile. You must know that this kind of behavior cannot be condoned at the Dogwood firm. Dogwood. Your expertise as a systems analyst is vital to us, but your outstanding ability does not justify your singular poor judgment. In the future, please limit your use of the Dogwood firm's technology to work-specific business. Dogwood. Thank you in advance for your cooperation. Sincerely, Edmund Lee. Edmund Lee. Chief Technology Officer. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC EBS 202, Test 3. Number 2. One evening, just 3 days before the Olympics were to begin, my father called me into the kitchen. With a very stern look, he said, "Lisa, what do you plan to do after the Olympics are over?" Lisa. His question was like a bucket of ice-cold water being poured on me. Forced to face the reality beyond the summer, I answered rather weakly, "I don't know, Dad. I guess I'll just have to get a job since I didn't get into any of the schools I wanted to go to." Well, he said, you might not want to start filling out any job applications too soon. When I gave him a confused look, he smiled broadly. Lisa, after you go to the Olympics you're going to college. Lisa. Then he handed me a letter that stated that I had been accepted and was receiving financial grants to go to a 4-year university. 4. I screamed and jumped up and down. My father gave me a huge hug and we danced around the kitchen together, singing joyfully, "Go, Lisa! Go, Lisa! Lisa! Lisa!" MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC EBS 202, Test 3. Number 3. Globalization and technological innovation are key drivers of socio-economic transformations. Experts, not always decision makers, unfortunately, know the virtues and dangers of the former, but there is much uncertainty about how the latter will affect quality of life and social inequalities. An important point is that globalization and technological innovation are not natural processes that societies must either endure or stop. Quite to the contrary, the particular ways in which globalization and innovation unfold can be shaped by policies, and it is important to steer them in the direction of social inclusion. Therefore, not only should we make sure to support those who lose from the globalized economy and technological disruptions and ease their adaptation and transition to the new opportunities offered by these developments, but we can work to make the changes themselves occur in a way that generates less loss and more gain for all. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC EBS 202, Test 3. Number 4. Firms in the same industry may be able to imitate and copy one another more readily if they are located together. Therefore, they may be able to respond to changes in their industry more quickly than if they were isolated from their competitors. Of course, the firm that is copied may be harmed, so in this instance, it would be better off in an isolated location, where copying would be more difficult. However, managers may not know which firm will develop leading innovations. On average, the sharing of information may benefit the group. In industries with numerous and scattered innovations, such as fashion or computer games, all firms may be better off if they have locations that allow them to imitate quickly. Furthermore, a firm that copies two changes is in a better position to innovate additional changes by combining or modifying changes that were taken from other firms. Thus, particularly in fast-changing industries, economies from industrial imitation, modification, and innovation tend to be important sources of localization economies. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 3. Number 5. Workers are united by laughing at shared events, even ones that may initially spark anger or conflict. Humor reframes potentially divisive events into merely laughable ones which are put in perspective as subservient to unifying values held by organization members. Repeatedly recounting humorous incidents reinforces unity based on key organizational values. One team told repeated stories about a dumpster fire, something that does not seem funny on its face, but the reactions of workers motivated to preserve safety sparked laughter as the stories were shared multiple times by multiple parties in the workplace. Shared events that cause laughter can indicate a sense of belonging since you had to be there to see the humor in them, and non-members were not and do not. Instances of humor serve to enact bonds among organization members. Understanding the humor may even be required as an informal badge of membership in the organization. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 3. Number 6. As Marshall McLuhan famously said in the 1960s, we are now a post-literate society. Marshall McLuhan 1960. Our culture has returned to a kind of medieval attitude toward print. Extended reading and writing is something small elite groups do. Secondary schools and universities are trying desperately to keep these activities at the center of schooling, but even some of the most conservative Ivy League schools have replaced listening to lectures and writing essays with field work, role-playing games, online discussion, and other forms of experiential, interactive e-learning. Having a book published was once seen as the ultimate way of getting your message out to a wide audience. Today, a blogger can get millions of hits a day or an online video can have millions of views. If a book sells 5,000 copies in Canada, it is considered a bestseller. 5. The Coney 2012 video now stands at over 96 million views, a shocking statistic for a 30-minute video. Coney 2012 9630. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 3. Number 10. An Ashanti funeral is often held several weeks after a death. Ashanti. During this period, while the body is preserved in a mortuary, the family of the deceased works to prepare for the event. Funerals are traditionally the responsibility of a person's abuja, matri clan. These are relatives who are linked through common maternal ancestors. Abuja. They notify distant relatives, clean and tidy up the deceased person's house, and memorialize the departed family member on posters, t-shirts, and in other images that will be distributed to mourners. When all is ready, the body is brought back to the house and prepared for the funeral, covered with kente cloth and decorated with gold jewelry. The ceremonies can last several days. They begin with a lying-in state at the family home, which culminates in the presentation of burial gifts for use by the deceased in his or her journey to Asamando, the land of the dead. Asamando. Then come the burial and finally the great funeral, a public event honoring the deceased person with music, dancing, food, and drinks. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 3. Number 11. Some scientists compare the brain to a relay station that merely coordinates incoming signals and outgoing responses, whereas others see it as an immense computer that processes information and then arrives at an appropriate response. François Jacob, the French molecular biologist and Nobel laureate, suggests that the human mind is far more. It has a built-in need to create order out of the constant flow of information coming from its sensory organs. François Jacob. In other words, the brain creates a narrative, with a beginning, a middle, and an end, a temporal sequence that makes sense of events. The brain selects and discards information to be used in the narrative, constructing connections and relationships that create a web of meaning. In this way, a narrative reveals more than just what happened, it explains why. When the mind selects and orders incoming information into meaning, it is telling itself a story. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 3. Number 12. In general, searching online for health information can be valid, eye-opening, educational, and even useful. While many doctors roll their eyes when they hear, "I did my research," from a patient, sometimes that research can be sound. If a patient has a rare disease and presents articles about it, many of us will be grateful that we were saved some extra work. But the web becomes entangled when sites angled with opinions, personal anecdotes, exaggeration, and false claims manipulate the navigator to believe what is posted. People also run into trouble when looking for information online based on preconceived notions. Here comes the curse of the original belief. If you believe that megadosing on vitamin C will prevent colds, you will seek out, and easily find, sites promoting this notion. C. If you think that juice cleanses are the way to better health and well-being, it's easy to find websites supporting this. If delaying vaccines is your cup of tea, online sources abound. If you're debating whether to eat only organic food, plenty of available information will support this. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 3. Number 13. Beethoven himself raised the cash to visit Vienna at the age of 16 in the hope of persuading Mozart to give him lessons. 16 Vienna. Of an actual meeting with Mozart, there is no evidence outside the fields of romantic biography. But he did, or so it seems, hear Mozart play, and complained of the choppiness of his style, a description which has to be matched against Mozart's own statement that his piano music was meant to flow like oil. Yet Beethoven may well have been right. Mozart, for all his youthfulness, already had such crookedly arthritic fingers that observers remarked on his inability to cut his meat. If Beethoven had been able to prolong his stay in Vienna, he would surely have met Mozart in the end. Vienna. But a summons home to his mother's deathbed prevented his persistence from being put to the test. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 3. Number 14. It appears that Internet customers rarely secure the lowest price. According to a popular price comparison website, 80% of Internet customers pay more than they have to. 80. It seems that use of the Internet to obtain better value is restrained by loyalty to particular websites. Once they are familiar with a site, consumers may return to it later because it is easy to use and saves time. A consumer might agree that a book might be cheaper elsewhere but still use the online bookstore they're familiar with because of convenience. This convenience can be seen as considerable, as often customers allow trusted sites to store their credit card and delivery details, so purchasing really is a single click. Similarly, buyers normally use one online grocer because of the trouble of getting to know another site. In short, habits take over. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 3. Number 15. Findings from several studies on non-patient groups such as university students suggest that simply looking at everyday nature, as compared to built scenes that lack nature, is significantly more effective in promoting restoration from stress. One early study focused on students who were experiencing mild stress because of a final course exam. A self-ratings questionnaire was used to assess restorative influences of viewing either a diverse slide sample of unblighted built settings lacking nature, or slides of undistinguished nature settings dominated by green vegetation. Results suggested that the nature views fostered greater psychological restoration as indicated by larger reductions in negative feelings such as fear and anger/aggression and much higher levels of positive feelings. Also, the scenes with vegetation sustained interest and attention more effectively than did the urban scenes without nature. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 3. Number 16. Leonardo da Vinci had a keen interest in the reality and the wonders of nature as a broad and dynamic whole. The subject matter of his inspired paintings was almost more wondrous than reality. Da Vinci was also deeply curious about the small details that might be able to explain the human perceived wonders he painted. This can be readily seen both in his drawings of anatomical structures in biology and his refined representations of mechanical structures in physics. He published amazingly detailed drawings of human anatomy, where, as one biographer noted, he paid attention to the forms of even very small organs and hidden parts of the skeleton. Da Vinci is even credited with being the first in the modern world to introduce the idea of controlled experimentation, the core concept of science, and, for this, he has been considered by some writers to be the father of science. Probably more than any other scholastic luminary of that time, he recognized the relationship between the whole and its parts. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 3. Number 17. Many traditional sports remain important elements of contemporary national sporting cultures. Sumo, despite recent image problems, remains immensely popular and important in Japan. Similarly, sepak takraw and combat sports like Muay Thai, Silat, and Arnis remain permanent fixtures of Southeast Asia's sporting landscape. In many cases, however, what are commonly assumed to be traditional sporting practices actually represent hybrid amalgamations of traditional games and imported sporting values and practices. Judo, for instance, dates from only 1882 and was developed as a modernization of traditional styles of Jiu-Jitsu. 1882. Similarly, Muay Thai adopted the ring system of rounds, gloves, and weight divisions after concerns about high levels of death and injuries during the early 20th century, while sepak takraw took its current form in the 1930s, with the addition of a net and court adopted from badminton to the traditional pastime of kicking a rattan ball. 201930. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 3. Number 18. Although mobile healthcare network, MHN, applications provide numerous opportunities and benefits, they raise various security and privacy issues. MHN. Since the health information, e.g., phenomena, health condition, emergency, is relatively sensitive for users, any inappropriate disclosure may violate user privacy and even result in property loss. Users may also worry about their critical health data being tampered with when their health data are stored in the untrusted cloud servers. Moreover, some malicious attackers misbehave in MHNs to disrupt the effectiveness or mislead other users' preferences. MHN. Without appropriate security and privacy protections, users may not accept MHN applications. MHN. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 3. Number 19. I remember as a student going to a speed reading course of the type that was in vogue in the 1970s. 1970. We were led to believe that you could train your eye and brain to take in whole blocks of text, scores of words at a time, and that reading word by word was primitive and inefficient. It was the course that was a waste of time, however. The idea that you can take in the full meaning of large numbers of words in a single glance has been shown to be wrong. Yes, you can quickly understand the main point of a whole block of text at a single glance, and you can race through a book getting a pretty good idea of what the author is saying. But the faster you go, the more you miss. So if friends boast that they can read thick novels in an afternoon, test them on what they remember of the details. You probably can gather the plot by racing through a novel, but you'll miss much of the subtleties of the language, the scenes, and the narrative. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 3. Number 20. Strangely enough, volcanic events have been linked to changes in the El Niño cycle. Scientists at the National Center for Atmospheric Research have discovered a strong statistical link between El Niño and tropical volcanic eruptions. In the years following a major eruption, they argue, the chance of El Niño doubles compared with a standard year. It is not entirely clear at this point how volcanoes trigger El Niños, but the answer may lie in the global cooling that accompanies large eruptions. According to climatologist Michael Mann, the cooling effect of volcanoes would be more notable in the western part of the Pacific Ocean, thus reducing the temperature differential between the eastern and western Pacific and setting the stage for El Niño. Michael Mann. Since the El Niño in turn influences the formation of tropical cyclones, these findings suggest that tropical volcanoes may play a role in cyclonic weather as well. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 3. Number 21. On his long journey home after the Trojan War, the hero Odysseus came to an island where the goddess Circe advised him to avoid the sirens, beautiful winged monsters whose irresistible song lured mariners to their death. Odysseus' siren Circe. Forewarned but undaunted, Odysseus sailed into peril anyway. Odysseus. His plan, he would listen but not give in. The cunning hero packed his men's ears with beeswax and commanded them to tie him to the ship's mast. There he stood as they sailed into dangerous waters, the sirens called to him, and he heard their song. Siren. As Circe had predicted, he longed to go to them, to cast away everything he held dear. Circe. He shouted at his men, ordered, then begged them to set him free, but the mast was strong, the rope held fast, and his men couldn't hear his pleas. And so Odysseus did not perish, but emerged on the other side of the siren song wiser, more sensible, and prepared to complete his journey home. Odysseus, Siren. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 3. Number 22. The concentration of large-scale economic activity has resulted in the formation of multinational companies. These have their headquarters in one country but their commercial activities are conducted throughout the world. Incentives for them to do this include access to raw materials and, in the case of firms locating in the Third World, the availability of cheap labor. 3. Such multinational companies possess considerable influence over the operations of the government of the countries in which they invest, thereby undermining the economic and political independence of such countries. In return for providing jobs and revenue derived from taxing their operations, multinational companies may demand concessions from governments as the price for their investment in that country. They may seek direct or indirect control over a country's political system to ensure that government policy is compatible with the needs of the company. If these conflict, the government may suffer. In Guatemala, for example, President Jacobo Arbenz quarrels with the American United Fruit Company resulted in his replacement by an American-backed military government in 1954. Jacobo Arbenz United Fruit Company 1954. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 3. Number 23. Although from very early on infants show discrimination of their mother's voice and scent, they do not exhibit a clear preference for any particular caregiver. Infants are not attached to their caregivers at birth. Any caregiver responding to their needs would be as effective. Infants tend to respond similarly to any individual who tends to their signals or interacts with them. Yet, from the beginning, babies contribute to their interactions and exchanges with others. Built-in bias to orient to.d, look at, and listen to certain stimuli will contribute to paying attention to and eventually developing preference for those who interact with him and provide care on a regular basis. The infant uses characteristic reflexive responses in his behavioral repertoire, e.g., crying, head turning, reaching, grasping, when interacting with others. These behaviors typically have as a consequence to increase the time the baby is in proximity with those around him. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 3. Number 2425. Perhaps one of the most iconic memory studies was by Nisar and Harsh in 1992, in which they looked at flashbulb memories related to the Challenger explosion. 1992 Nisar Harsh. They gave 106 students in an introductory psychology class a questionnaire asking them to recall how they heard about the Challenger explosion, which had happened within the last 24 hours. 106, 24. They were given 7 specific questions about what they were doing and how they felt at the time. 7. 2.5 years later, the same students were given a follow-up questionnaire. 2. In this survey they were also asked to rate their confidence in the accuracy of their memory on a scale from 1 to 5. 1-5. Of the 7 details they previously recorded, on average the students could remember only 2.95 of them. 7 2.95. A quarter of the students scored 0 out of 7, and half scored 2 or less. 41702. In fact, only a quarter of the students even remembered taking the survey previously. 4-1. Despite their terrible recall of the event, the average score of confidence in the accuracy of their memories was as high as 4.17 out of 5. 4.17. Other studies have also shown the lack of any relationship between confidence in a memory and its accuracy. We tend to think that vividness and confidence predict accuracy, but they don't. The clear lesson here is that we all need to be humble when it comes to the accuracy of our own memories. Failure to appreciate the true nature of memory can create great mischief. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 3. Number 2628. One of the most extraordinary Olympic marathons was the one held during the 1908 London Games. 1908. The first to cross the finishing line in what later became known as the Dorando Marathon was Italian pastry cook Dorando Pietri. Dorando Pietri. Pietri, a small man, was an amazing runner. Pietri. At 17, he once delivered an urgent message for his employer by running the 15 miles. 1715. This was the start of an impressive running career. He ran, and won, a number of marathons, and then came the 1908 London Olympics. 1908. The day of the race was a hot one. The course of just over 26 miles ran from Windsor Castle to the White City Stadium. 26 Windsor Castle White City Stadium. The streets were lined with 250,000 spectators. 25. Dorando Pietri was up with the leaders from the outset and, with the finishing line in sight, he streaked into the lead, with American runner John Hayes close behind. Dorando Pietri, John Hayes. As he entered the stadium, Pietri was suffering from heat exhaustion and fell several times inside the stadium. Pietri. He kept falling and struggling back to his feet and falling down again. It was now that Olympic officials, obviously impressed by Pietri's get up and go, rushed across the track, picked him up and helped him across the finishing line. Pietri. When John Hayes crossed the line moments later, it was he who was declared the winner. John Hayes. The gold medal was given to the American runner. The officials' help had disqualified Pietri. The crowd was horrified. The Olympic officials who should have known better had made a serious blunder, having been caught up in the excitement and drama of the moment. But rules are rules. Pietri may not have won the gold medal, or silver or bronze, come to that, but he was eventually presented with a special silver cup on the following day by Queen Alexandra, who was so taken by the plight and bravery of the little Italian. Pietri, Queen Alexandra. MTC. Good job.